The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
Hello and welcome to another edition of The Gloves Are Off. I am Moses Wilder. We've got a great show for you, including that great comeback by the Calgary Flames. But first, we've got to get to our guests and some other topics. Well, Andrew Brethauer, how are you doing, man?
Good, yourself?
Excellent. Glad to have you back on, our guest, or not guest, but my co-host, that is.
Co-host
of the show. Exactly. You've transitioned to it fairly well.
Your spot's next.
Well, we'll see what happens. I'll fight you for it. And nevertheless, this guy who's known as a fighter, known as a great writer as well. We can give you some props on that. What comes first, the fighting or the writing?
I don't know if I've ever fought before in my life, so I would probably have to go with writing. Maybe a couple hockey fights in Bantam, but that's about it.
All right, well, there you go. Chris Roberts, you are the new editor at the Vermilion Standard. Of course, you are familiar with the show as well as the Lloydminster area. You did work with the Lloydminster Source, helping out with the sports here, so you definitely know the lay of the land, and we're awesome to have you back, man.
Glad to be back.
All right, well, we'll start with this. Talk about what was, I guess, the biggest thing out of the weekend, and that was the fight of the century. That's debatable. But it was dubbed the fight of the century going in, and it turned out to be 12 rounds of people wanting their money back. $100 spent, $100 wasted. And then you look at this fight. You had, I don't know how you would say this, but you had all the hype that went through it. You had Mayweather coming in, you had Pacquiao, you had these two different styles, two different personalities. It had everything there, but yet there was no feeling, there was nothing. People were disappointed. How would you rate this fight?
I'd say it was the cash grab of the century. I mean, both guys walk away with $100 million, regardless of what happens. I listened to some things you talk about, the comparisons to the UFC and things like that. I mean, look at the purses in the UFC. You have a fight of the night bonus, things like that. I mean, when you look at, Mayweather was the promoter. He's the one promoting the fight. Someone made the comparison again. It's like McDonald's having a burger contest and McDonald's enters. I mean, the whole thing was just a joke of a weekend. And I mean, I didn't see it personally, but I know there's a lot of negativity surrounding it right now.
I streamed it and I want my money back. Like, that's how bad it was. Like, you mentioned everything they have. Had the personalities, had the big pay-per-view, the big ticket. The only thing it didn't have was boxing. And that's the biggest thing. It was not a great boxing match.
There are talks of a rematch. Would you go see a rematch? But you hear all the things, the bad shoulder, the injuries for Mayweather as well. There was a lot that was riding on this fight, and I guess people were disappointed, but you started to hear as why it wasn't as good. Would that make you want to go see it again?
No, not at all. And what was it, Stephen A. Smith, who said Mayweather texted him or something about the potential rematch? Which is, again, another joke. And, yeah, I have no interest in a rematch whatsoever.
You can have a rematch if the match originally is good.
Yeah.
We mentioned UFC. You look at all the UFC rematches, Kane versus Del Santos. Like, those are rematches you want to see, not what that was. That wasn't a rematch worthy.
Yeah. In a year when Mayweather wants more money, maybe they'll set things up.
Yeah, we're going to throw another $200 million at him to do a rematch of the same fight that really wasn't entertaining, wasn't great anymore in the standards of today.
I guess then what's next for boxing? Is boxing dead? A lot of people are saying boxing's officially dead after that fight. Tongue-in-cheek or being serious? What do you guys think of that?
I think it was on the ropes heading into that weekend. Like I said, I didn't see the fight, but I mean, from what I've read and heard about it, didn't really inspire much confidence in the future of boxing. I don't know what you can add to that.
Yeah, in terms of where boxing is and what it has now, there is nothing left. And it's terrible to say, because boxing is a great sport to watch when you can actually know what's going on and get into it. But I think because of, you take the UFC and what that's been able to accomplish, there's really no room anymore for what boxing brings. I really don't think there is. We want to see,
somebody has to bite an ear off. That's essentially what
pretty much what we need. You need something. You need UFC offers so much more now, so much more technical rather than just two guys punching each other. I don't think getting old. When you get older, people aren't going to appreciate the art form that is boxing as much as they're going to appreciate what MMA brings. So
exactly.
This fight was the marquee was, but what's going to be the next marquee? There is nothing right now. There's not one single boxer on this planet anyone could probably name off the top of their head, unless you're a religious boxing fan. I can't. And
Casual fan, I think that's the
Yeah.
issue.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like, oh, this so-and-so looks pretty good.
Yeah.
There's nothing there that grabs you, and that's the situation. We'll move on to the Western Hockey League. The Bantam Draft is this Thursday. You have a few promising kids from the area that will be part of this draft. Most notably, of course, Ty Smith going number 1 overall. Very likely going number 1 overall to the Spokane Chiefs. But guys, you could either talk about Ty Smith, or maybe perhaps there's others that you want to highlight in terms of Lloydminster kids. What will we see and how will they fare Thursday?
First for me, I mean, 2 weeks back in the region, so I'm not, again, entirely familiar
not
with
up
all
to
the
date?
players.
Come
No, I know. But one thing I looked, there's a couple kids, both named Chase, I believe. Wouters and Hagar,
Yep.
I want to say. I think there was another kid last year drafted, Chase Stevenson.
Yep. Chase is.
What were parents doing 15, 16 years ago? I mean, was there not any other names available? But I get the sense both of those guys are probably second, third round picks. And I guess that's probably good for them. There's another kid who my predecessor in Vermilion did a feature on, Oren
Centazzo.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Just out of Marwayne.
And I think he's a kid from Marwayne, and I believe he'll probably go 3rd or 4th round, somewhere like that.
Yeah, he's expected to go a little bit higher because of what he brings. He didn't do a lot during the year, but people see the, I guess, ability he have. You look at last year, say a Logan Gainey, didn't gain a lot of notoriety on that Heat team, but is a player that scouts love because of what he would bring. And then this year you saw it on the Baker Hughes team. So yeah, Ty Smith's definitely probably your first overall. If you don't take him, I don't know what you're thinking. But it's kind of like, it is a little bit of letdown. Last 2 years we've had such great stock, I guess you could say, in Lloydminster of the WHL league.
Well, I'd still say that it's still pretty decent. If you look at
so.
Smith, he'll be the highest ranked player from the Lloydminster area to go in the Bantam draft. In the last 11 years, 3 Lloydminster players have been drafted in the first round. So if you look at that, it seems like it is growing. Granted, you don't have the kids, or you're starting to see from the hype from their days moving into Bantam and then, say, into the midget AAAs. But I still feel that there's a fair amount of kids that would come out and do well.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of that, I think we could see a brighter future. Is there kids perhaps that you want to say will be successful? It's so hard to judge, but is there a kid that you're like, I've seen this kid play, or I've heard of this kid, I want to
Go ahead.
do well.
Who you see?
I know you haven't had the issue, but I'm just saying.
Like a guy like Chase Wouters is a great example of, he led this Bantam Heat team, and then we talk about Ryan Centaro, another guy, like he brings a skill set, and when you're drafting Bantam kids, that's what you're drafting. You're not drafting high profile. Like there is high profile. Like look back at guys like Cale Clegg and last year Jansen Leslie, who are skilled hockey players, but there's also players that bring a skill set to the team, and that's what I think we're getting away from learning about size, and we're worrying more about the skill than what players actually bring. So especially here, we have very skilled coaches who are teaching these kids how to play hockey properly.
Well, it's hard to look for, size and things like that when
At
these
14.
kids are 14 and to project what they're going to ultimately become. In looking at a couple of the prospects, I don't know what their accurate size is now, but I'm seeing things like 5'1", you're 120 pounds and things like that.
Well, I guess, is that the change now? I guess we'll ask you that real quickly. Is that what we're seeing? You're not looking for a kid that's going to be 5'11" at the age of 14. You're looking at a kid that might be smaller but has a tremendous skill level and perhaps I guess a high ceiling when it comes to that talent, right?
I would say that's probably the case. And even look at last night in Calgary, Johnny Gaudreau and the Patrick Kane were probably the 2 stars, who kind of came to the forefront last night. And that's probably the case throughout hockey. I don't know if you can really judge at Bantam, what a kid is going to become, like I said.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to take a commercial break. We'll talk a little bit more. We'll get you to chime in, Andrew. But we're going to take a commercial break and be back with more Gloves Are Off.